We're delighted to have you all with us today for this discussion. Often on these events, we focus on what's happening in the news around existential risk, but I'm a historian by trade and inclination, and I thoroughly believe that you cannot understand the present without understanding the past. Today, we're going to be focusing on an epochal moment of the modern age, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The psychologist Robert J. Lifton suggested in the early 1960s that, quote, our perceptions of Hiroshima and her neglected historical sister Nagasaki are the beginnings of a new dimension of thought about death and life. And the ways in which these events have been understood by the leaders of the world's nations and the people living in them have shaped the last 81 years for better and ill. And the current state of nuclear policy and the world is a direct consequence of the perceptions that people had about the atomic bomb. I've written about this subject at the Bulletin and elsewhere. I have a book, The Most Awful Responsibility. You can check it out. When I write at this, I come at this from the point of view of a historian, which is a world of archival documents and academic debates. And that's only one way to understand these issues. So I'm really happy to be here today with two other storytellers, both of whom have come at these questions from very different perspectives. First, we have with us Mitchie Takeuchi. She's a second-generation hibakusha, so a survivor of the nuclear attacks in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, who has worked to tell her family's story as well as uplift the stories of others. Her recent film, The Vow from Hiroshima, is about Satsuko Thurlow, a disarmament activist and hibakusha whose work with ICAN helped the organization win the Nobel Peace Prize and bring the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons into force. We are also joined by film producer Donald Rosenfeld, who is known for such films as Remains of the Day, Tree of Life, Howard's End, and my personal favorite of his, Jodorowsky's Dune. Donald is currently working on a film based on a new book that has just come out, Hiroshima 815, that is the long-lost memoir of Reverend Kiyoshi Tanimoto, one of the people profiled in John Hershey's landmark book, Hiroshima, who also played a major role in shaping how the hibakusha were discussed in both Japan and the United States in the 1950s. And if you read my recent article in the Bulletin about the Hiroshima Maidens, he is very important to that story as well. Today, we want to talk about the bombings of August 6th and August 9th, 1945, about the experiences of the hibakusha after the bombings, and what these stories hold for us today, particularly as the wartime experiences are moving entirely into historical memory and out of lived experience. How should we tell these stories? If every generation understands history partially on its own terms for its own reasons, how should we read these stories today? I'll begin with some questions for our speakers, but I'm eager to hear from the audience as well. The three of us are very immersed in this topic, but don't feel shy to ask even basic questions. As I think you'll see, even a lot of the basic stuff is complicated. We'll be monitoring the chat on YouTube and bringing the questions in as we can. So let's begin. Mitchie, can you start us off by telling us how you became involved with this work?
Recording in progress.
Such amazing company. Well, my connection to Hiroshima is very personal. I grew up in Hiroshima, and both my mother and my grandfather survived the atomic bombing. But interestingly, that is not really how I became involved in this work and this world. For many years, I actually hesitated to talk about my family history. I knew some of the facts a little bit, but I hadn't heard their experiences directly. So I wasn't sure if it was really my story to tell. What began to change me, though, was meeting all the hibakusha, activists, doctors, and many other people who had devoted themselves for elimination of nuclear weapons. Many of them had no personal connection to Hiroshima at all. Seeing their passion made me look myself differently and also my family background. They are so committed to this particular issue. Me, coming from the family, I'm not doing anything. Something is a little weird. Then I met Setsuko Soro. I wasn't a filmmaker looking for a story. The Vow from Hiroshima was actually my first film. I simply felt that extraordinary things were happening around Setsuko, and no one was capturing them. These moments felt too precious to lose. So perhaps rather naively, I thought, maybe I can do this. And that decision changed my own relationship with Hiroshima as well. In a way, the story created the filmmaker. That's how it went.
That's really wonderful. Thank you, Michi. Donald, can you tell us a bit about what you've been working on this, and about Reverend Tanimoto's story and the memoir, and what got you involved in this? What about this drew you into it and made you think that this should be a movie?
Absolutely. You know, most of us have read Hiroshima by John Hersey, where we were first discovered Tanimoto. And just in researching the story, which I always thought it should be a movie, I mean, I kind of waited for Oppenheimer to come out. I thought maybe they'd cover the ground of what happened after the bomb, but since it ends with that, we can begin our movie where they left off, which I think is very important. So in the Beinecke Library with John Hersey's grandson, we were able to uncover this lost memoir. So it had never been published. It was written in the English language. Tanimoto had gone to Emory University and learned English for an advanced divinity degree in the 1930s. So we were, you know, found this treasure, and I sent it to David Korn, who's an old friend of Mother Jones, and said, "What do you think?" And he read it, and he edited it and really focused it. And then I thought, you know, I might publish it with my publishing company, Pan America Books. But then I thought, well, I'm going to give everything to the family. Let's see if I can get them a big advance, and let's see if we can get a major publisher. So through an agent named Richard Pine, we were able to get to Modern Library, and they said it's really the first book that they'd published that wasn't a reprint, really. You know, it was an incredible, exciting discovery for them. So they really got behind it. I mean, they've initially we talked about a paperback, and they made it a hardback. Initially, we talked about 50,000 copies, and it became 350,000 copies. You know, so they got further and further. And then Penguin, which is now merged with Random, took the rest of the world in English. And over the past few months, most countries have you know, bought the right to bring out their language, whether it was Israel or Lebanon or Poland or most of the Scandinavian countries. Everyone is Portugal yesterday. They're all creating their own language version. So it's really going to be a worldwide book. And the further you know, I acquired the film rights to it, and I said, we've got to adapt it. And I brought in Phil Zwano, director, who's made many movies, but one that people know well, State of Grace. And he, within about 3 weeks, wrote this incredible adaptation in a fever dream. He basically never slept. He just kept writing, and he'll direct it. And we are just starting the casting. We'll probably start shooting in April. But what's interesting is Tanimoto's there on the day. He survives. He's just out of town, basically moving a church piano, not because he knew the nuclear bomb was coming, but he knew what was happening down south in Okinawa, and he thought we better start protecting things that are valuable and essential. So he was in a fortified, walled kind of structure, putting the piano away, and literally 8:15. So he immediately went down to find his family, to help anyone he could. And, you know, this went on for days into weeks into months, but he's there 6 months before Hershey arrives. So it's not only the Japanese account, but it's an account of somebody really there. So it brings a whole nother color to what the movie can be. And then I said, we've got to make it. And I just started raising, you know, my movies are always independent. We raise the money privately, and really through just people who care for the most part. Most of the movies are literary or historical. I don't make junk, and you know, you find investors, and we make them very cheaply, but they look beautiful. You know, we don't take fees. The actors take a far reduced fee. I mean, for today, you know, just one of our actors' fees would be 10 of these movies. You know, the world has changed so much. But anyway, we're really excited. We think that the book is paving the way, but the movie will also have an audience, and then, you know, we'll bring out the book again, I'm sure, when the movie comes out. So the movie, in a perfect world, will be completed late 2027, and then come out for the Cannes Film Festival 2028. You know, I've had great luck there, winning 2 Palme d'Ors. We've got to get a third one. but we'll see what happens. And all in all, it's just a labor of love, like all these movies. But this one in particular, I think it's never been told, certainly not in this way.
So I have just a follow-up question for that. Whenever I talk with publishers or any people in Hollywood, they always say, nobody wants to watch a movie about this. No one wants to read a book about this. This is not that there's no audience for other than niche people. I think you're, at least with the book, it seems like that is not what anybody thinks. And I assume you think there's an audience for the movie. Do you think something has changed, or do you just think that the popular wisdom is wrong?
Two things. Let's quote my old friend William Goldman: "Nobody knows anything in Hollywood." So you can't really ROI art, but and most of Hollywood was once made greater things than they do today. But I would say it's a group of people who are scared, and they're not really filmmakers anymore. They're ex-agents who have actor relationships, or they're ex-lawyers, business people. There's nobody really. I mean, when I started 45 years ago, there were people who actually made movies. I mean, the head of publicity had been the head of publicity on the waterfront. The head of, they really were out in the movie business. The head of physical production had made many movies with many directors. So you just don't find those people anymore in the studio system. So yes, this would never be funded by them, and they'll never believe in it. When it's finished, which I always do, I pay for it. I raise the money, we make it. Then I decide on distribution. The people who will want to distribute it will be the majors. They'll realize there's an audience. The book does pave the way, but also there's interest in the story. But there's no movie I've ever done that didn't fail in every way, in a test screening, in a studio gathering. I remember Remains of the Day is a great one, which was the head of production came in and the head of distribution, and they each had 3 envelopes from me, Merchant Ivory. I opened my envelope, it was $1 million. Theirs were 2 each. And we had our $5 million. We'll give it to you if they can kiss in the end. I mean, it's a film about unrequited love. So I called Ishiguro and said, "Can you believe it? These people." I tore mine up in front of him. Ismail tore his up. Jim quietly put it in his pocket just to, I think, be funny. But Ishiguro said, "You should have taken the money. The book stands. Let the movie be a movie." But he was happy in the end that we didn't. But that's how they think. They always want to change your ending. They always want to. It's just they just aren't filmmakers anymore. And I think we will prove that this is a critical and an audience success worldwide. And if we don't, it will be a shame, but it should be, because it's probably the most important story of our time. But that's been the case since that first bomb went off.
Mishi, you've also made a movie. Can you speak a little bit more about what the movie is about and how that came around, and how you've come to talking about another Hibakusha story, how you feel about doing that?
Okay. Well, the film is about Setsuko Soro, whom a lot of you would probably know. She survived the atomic bombing at the age of 13 and went on to commit her life to abolishing nuclear weapons. What was extraordinary about making this film was that we were witnessing history as it unfolded. This was not a story where we knew the ending, because it's a documentary too, and reality kept evolving while we were filming. Setsuko's work continued, and the nuclear disarmament movement continued to advance. We were capturing moments that were becoming history without knowing where the story would lead. When we started, we had no idea that TPNW, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, would be adopted at the UN, or that ICAN would receive the Nobel Peace Prize and Setsuko would stand on the stage in Oslo. So we were not recreating the history. We were there as it was actually happening. And at the same time, something else happened. And that is about making a story about another Hibakusha. But what happened that I never expected was that by telling Setsuko's story, making the film began to change my thoughts about my own family, my grandfather and my mother. So that would be my next project.
That's really interesting. For Donald, how do you approach handling a topic of this level of sensitivity, especially as someone who is not a hibakusha, I assume?
Well, I mean, we certainly, my partners in the movie, Gannon Hershey and Tako Nishima, have been documentarians and working with survivors for over a decade, and we've gotten to know many. Coco, the daughter of Tanimoto, has been a great guide as well. So I've spent many trips to Japan speaking with them, and we were absolutely, even as we're publishing the book, we spoke to all the families who are mentioned and talked to, and everyone really embraced what they know the kind of movies I make. I mean, I think it would be a little scary if James Cameron, who's doing his movie, and said, "I got to learn something about the Japanese culture, I guess, before I start." He was in an interview the other day, but he's doing his rival version. But I just think there, maybe they should be a little worried. But I think in our case, we've always told the stories, and ideally, in this case, really from the voice of Japan, which is something no one's done. I mean, there have been Japanese documentaries, but certainly not a major release. There'll be a worldwide film that's treated in this way in the English language. There will be Japanese spoken in the movie too. Hiro Takahara, who we just hired to play Tanimoto, who's in Shogun and many other things, and he's the son of two actors, pretty well-known Japanese actors who were in Nagasaki and survived. So he cares about this in a way that's even richer than probably a lot of actors. He's so far, I would say this generation is very interested in the story being told properly. So I think in that case, they're trusting us to do it. If we don't, that would be tragic. We're going to tell it right.
Michi, with your film that you've made and the one that you're planning on making, what do you hope audiences will take away from that when they see it? What do you think when they walk out of the theater, what do you want them to be thinking?
Yes. Well, we've shown, let's say, the vow from Hiroshima with many different kinds of audience and many different kinds of locations. And I realized, but one response from the audience comes up again and again, which is, what can I do to contribute to this movement? I find this very moving and also very rewarding because my film doesn't really tell people what they should be doing. Setsuko's life, wonderfully, Setsuko's life makes people ask that question for themselves. And that is really what I hope what people take away from this film. So what could they do? And then this is not just about what a terrible thing happened in Hiroshima 81 years ago, but what does this history ask for me today? And that's what I really hope our film to generate.
That's really interesting. Don, what are you hoping that people will come out of your film that you're making thinking?
Well, you said it, at the first introduction. You said, we have to know history if we're going to know ourselves, to understand anything. So it's a historical recreation, I guess you could say, that has never been done and needs to be done, so we can remember. And it'll ideally be there as long as a digital signal is there, or whatever we want to say. So we hope it lasts through time. The other thing is just that we don't want it to happen again. We got to do everything we can. I think those are the two main things, but also that these were people, and that war, destroys people. I mean, I think it's important that, there's so much humanity in the memoir that if we can bring that to the screen, I think it'll bring people back, that it's not just machines. It's not just, I mean, the Oppenheimer movie I find interesting because, if it were about the Nazis and the Holocaust, it would be a movie about the creation of Zyklon B. I mean, it's a very strange thing that you're focusing the whole movie on a weapon. And they weirdly, in a way, lucky for this movie, because it really wouldn't have as much of a chance, they left this part out, which is the victims. And we feel strongly about it, that it needs to be told.
That's a fascinating commentary, especially the Zyklon B bit. I hadn't thought about that. Michi, you've worked on the book Unforgettable Fire, right? Pictures drawn by atomic bomb survivor, which is one of my favorites. I mean, as much as one can have favorites in this genre, but it's worth checking out. You can find it on archive.org if you want. It's from the 70s. It's most of them are not wonderful artists, but they convey their emotional experience very well of what it looked like to them, which it's impressionistic. It's everything you can imagine it would be. How do you think about the translation from the Japanese experience, both culturally, because Japan and the rest of the world, especially the United States, are quite different, but also even linguistically, the language is so difficult to translate. These are not, even a term like hibakusha is a complex term in Japanese, and in America we usually just say victims, which I'm under the impression that the Japanese generally don't like to use that term. I just want to, do you have thoughts about the difficulties of making that, or maybe opportunities of making that translation?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Thank you. And in my case, it's a little bit strange in a way that because first of all, my priority goal of making the vow was to share the experience about what happened through Setsuko's life, what happened to the American or North American people who were not well informed about this critical issue. So my main target audience, I shouldn't say target, my audience was North Americans.
Mhm.
Thus, everything was done from English language base.
Mhm.
I was just the only Japanese who was on the team. So in terms of actual linguistic translation, we didn't really have the issue. But again, you made a great comment about cultural, contextual situation where translating word to word doesn't translate the story. Therefore, I paid a lot of attention, our team paid attention to make sure what each person is talking about gets translated in quote, so that what they are saying is really conveyed in the contextual backgrounds. Does that make sense to you?
That makes perfect sense. Thanks so much. One of the things about Unforgettable Fire that I find amazing is that, of course, it's in sometimes quite stark ways, it's quite graphic, right? It's not as graphic as a photograph of a dead body, but there's something worse about somebody's drawings of 1,000 little corpses as little black marks in a temple or something like that, or little red marks. It's visual. It's strikingly visual in a way that's hard to do with this topic because so many of the photographs we have are from well after the fact and it just looks sterile. Or we have a few things from the day of and they're horrible. And so this is actually a question for Don. I'm pivoting. Don, how are you going to deal with the fact that Hiroshima is like a horrible thing to look at, and it's, you know, how are you planning on treating this subject that, you know, could be really graphic? On the one hand, you want it to be real and impactful. This I assume. On the other hand, there's a problem with even making, I don't know. What are your thoughts on this particular issue?
Well, I mean, if you read the memoir, he certainly, covers the ground, and we're going to be respectful to it. But there is horror to be seen, and I think we're going to have to show it. I mean, there's no way around it. You can't, will it be a constant? No, but you'll certainly experience it. You have to. Yeah.
One of my favorite versions of this story, again, is not drawings, a Barefoot Gen,
Sure.
which the medium of the anime or the manga both allows for that to be as disturbing as it needs to be and as not disturbing as it needs to be, and it's pretty disturbing.
Yeah, I was going to say Barefoot Gen if it's that disturbing a comic, you can imagine. No, it's a manga or an animated movie, but it's incredible. I have a friend who's doing a documentary about Barefoot Gen right now, and it's been really interesting to look at the original drawings and things. It's, he really got inside it.
And he was a survivor as well.
Yes.
And this is me just associating here. When I think of what makes Hiroshima, the Hershey book, so impactful, and I haven't read the Tanimoto memoir yet. Hiroshima has no illustrations whatsoever. I give this to undergraduates all the time. I sign it, and these are, young engineering students who don't read a lot generally, and they come away going, "Oh my God, this book gripped me and it was so horrible, but I couldn't put it down." And I mean, it really still hits all these years later, which is really pretty impressive. But I mean, the horror of it is not the gory things. The horror is somebody, and this is in Tanimoto's part of it, somebody in a burning building screaming for help, and you can't help them, which is somehow worse than a dead body.
Yeah,
right?
his constant refrain is the guilt of not being able to solve everything, and he just keeps at it, but there's so many things that can't be saved, and so many, he laments that continuously. I mean,
Mitchie, what is your take? I mean, how graphic should these be? How implied? How do you deal with the violence? Even the scarred bodies, which Tanimoto was involved with that campaign, again, the Hiroshima Maidens. Any thoughts you had?
Well, so about visual presentations, let's say, of Hiroshima, right? Let's say. And the director of the film, Susan Strickler, and I were very aware how powerful graphic images of suffering are. That's very important to share that. So I don't want to minimize the cruelty and evidence of what happened, of course. But at the same time, we didn't want to show images that were so overwhelming that people would turn away, especially high school and college students. And actually, I was one of those young people in Hiroshima when I went to the, when I went to the exhibit and saw this horrific photograph. Maybe I was 10, 11 years old. I was horrified, and I could not deal with that particular experience ever again, So we don't want to overwhelm people and turn away. So I think the use of artwork, that is very, very important because that shows emotions, and also that it really presents the horrible circumstance that allowed some imagination for the people who are watching it. So I really felt that I really needed to keep a good balance. How far do we go, but how much do we want to accomplish by inclusive of a lot of people than exclusive of the, certain kind of people. So that's what we have to do. It's very challenging.
Yeah, I can see that. And yeah, I was thinking again of Unforgettable Fire. You couldn't, if you had photographs showing those things, no one would want them in a big book. They would be too horrible. But the art somehow keeps the horror, but gives some distance. It's very, again, I heavily recommend people seek this out if they're interested. It's on archive.org.
I was just going to say, if you go to the Memorial Museum at Hiroshima, there are horrors throughout. But I remember being incredibly moved by this tricycle. It survived, but the child that was on the tricycle was incinerated, and they tell you that in a note. And that's, talk about negative space or absence. I mean, it's just the most powerful thing you could imagine, and terrible. So it works that way throughout. And there are many, when you're with a crowd of people, you see the reactions, and people look away a lot. I mean, that's just the way it is. But they managed to do it, and it's a very powerful place. I mean,
the picture. Oh, sorry. Go for it, Michi.
Oh, I'm sorry. And then, so over the years, Hiroshima Peace Museum, right? For example. So when I was young, that was many, many years ago. So the museum exhibits were way more severe. way more realistic. That's why I was like horrified with a nightmare as a child. So over the years, right? Okay, 80 years has passed. They started to curate the exhibitions in much more less cruel way. In other words, so that it's not as scary and graphic as they used to be. And I think these things also evolve as time goes on, I think.
Sure.
I've seen photographs of the museum in the 80s or the early 90s where it had like mannequins and things like that, which when I went maybe a little over 10 years ago, it was as you describe. It was and as you're saying, Dom, the absence is applied a lot of the time. For me, the most haunting photograph in the whole one is it's a giant picture of an elementary school class posing for class photo, and they're having such a good time, and they're just you feel like you know these kids. You feel like I went to school with half of them. It feels like, and the teacher's having fun, and they're having such a hard time not laughing because they're goofing in this photo, and then it tells you in the caption, this is 1 kilometer from the hypocenter, and you're just like, oh my God, this is what this means to destroy a city. Michi, this gets to this other question I have, which is there are fewer and fewer hibakushu left. Ones who are direct, if they were would have been children at the time. Um, as a second generation Hibakushu, you've taken on the mantle of telling the story. How do you carry on the tradition? How will it go beyond you? I mean, what happens when there aren't second generation Hibakushu left? I mean, hopefully not soon, but time is passing. What do you think about this, and how Americans think about this, but also how Japanese think about this?
Okay, that's a very sensitive question,
Yeah.
but I really feel that's why I decided to make this documentary film, because I understood the power of film, how film can open up the world that nobody knows even exists, right? So that I think it's very important for all of sort of people to continue discovering different stories and keep telling the story through this creative process. I just want to tell you, because I'm here in the United States, because one film, I happened to watch one particular film in 1975 in Hiroshima. That film made me decide to come to the United States. So I guess I've experienced how powerful the film is. And I think that's why it's great that the Donald is taking on this amazing, project, which could change a lot of people's world too.
Can I ask you what film you saw?
Thank you for asking. Well, actually, that was Jane Fonda's Clute.
Amazing.
Yeah. And then I have to tell you, I have to share this. I was a teenager, and you are not supposed to go to see a film on the way coming back from high school. However, and Jane Fonda was in Iwakuni, American, military base and so on, and she looked so cool, right? Anyway, so I found out there is this movie, this amazing looking actress is in, and the Japanese title of the film, believe or not, Call Girl, Call Girl. That was the title instead of Clute, because she played as a call girl in the film. I went to see the film anyway, and then I found out there is a scene where Jane Fonda, Brie Daniels, go and see this woman who looks like a doctor, right? She goes and talk and speak about everything that goes in her. And that happened. I was like, who is this woman? I had to see this film 7 times to understand what that role was. That was psychotherapist, psychoanalysis, psychotherapist. I had no idea that existed. So that really determined I really want to be that person, that profession. So I convinced my parents I gotta go to the United States to study this amazing profession. So I did, and then instead of becoming psychotherapist, I ended up going to the psychotherapy, but still, that really changed my life.
That's incredible.
That is incredible. That's
What an
fascinating.
excellent movie it is. I mean, Donald Sutherland, etc. But wonderful.
Donald, I wanted to ask you, why Tanimoto? Why is he a powerful anchor for this story? You could pick a lot of survivors. I know you have the memoir, that's a good hook for sure. But I mean, what do you get by focusing on him in your mind?
I mean, I think it's for so many stories. What we can't imagine is that one person does make a difference.
Mm.
You know, I think we have the negative make a difference of Hitler and Mao and, you know, Mussolini and Pol Pot and all the rest. But there's also this other person. There's the Mother Teresa. There's Gandhi. There's, you know, Eleanor Roosevelt. There, you know, I mean, it's amazing to me always that for the good, especially, one person really can do it. And he just represented that to me in the way he looks at it and the way I'm able to, you know, both initially through Hershey, but now through his words, even much more so, just get inside that character. And he becomes, you know, everywhere Hershey went was where Tanimoto went. You have to realize, because he's Hershey's translator for two reasons. One, he's one of the few people who would speak English. Two, willing to do it. Three, he knew where the people were. And all those characters are Tanimoto's encounters. They're not, you know, they're not Hershey's. I mean, but Hershey does an incredible, you know, he brings magic too. I mean, he's a brilliant writer. He's a brilliant, you know, thinker. He is, you know, the fact that they published it in the New Yorker as a, you know, single issue really is probably, it was seen by more people who should see it and talk about it, and it became the book it became. I mean, it was a brilliant thing. I think who's done it since? Jonathan Shell and George W.S. Trow. There haven't been a lot of single issue. I think Trow's were two for within the context of No Context. But the point of that, the fact that he's the only journalist who, you know, there was a New York Times person, but he's the only one who really got in with the story, and he wasn't allowed to take notes. He wasn't, you know, he was very restricted, and you know, he finds a way to tell the story. And Tanimoto is kind of like the living character from that book. It's almost like the book comes alive, in my opinion. So that was the reasoning.
That's interesting. It's this influence where he is directing the eye, essentially. I mean, Hershey still has to do the work, but playing this role, directing the eye, which then brings that story to the United States, to the world. And now he's directing your eye. Now you're taking Tanimoto and again letting him
he's
be
our Beatrice or whatever. You know, he's taking us through hell. You know, and it is incredible. Yeah, I think I was telling his daughter Coco this morning that it's amazing that this book was beyond gathering dust. It had never really been read, and you know, I just was amazed when we had it, and I just thought, let's do something with it. And I you know, the dream was never that it would be so embraced by publishers, but also bookstores. I mean, it's crazy when you go to Target in St. Louis, Missouri, where I am today, and it's there in multiple, you know, I mean, it's not to put down Target, but that, you know, people buy books there, and it's at Walmart, and it's at, you know, it's not just at Barnes and Noble, and not just at the great independent booksellers of America. It's everywhere, and that in Canada too, and all over England. I mean, it's W.H. Smith at the airport. Somebody just called me and showed it to me from the airport in Glasgow. They're like, here it is, you know. So, you know, and there aren't that many books chosen for that holy airport spot. So it's just, it's pretty amazing to me. So hopefully the movie will take that even further, you know.
That's great. So
we're reaching people. That's all we're trying to do. That's what it is, you know.
So last question for both of you, because we're running out of time.
Really?
I know it goes by fast. Assuming do I have the right time or do I not have the right time?
We started with 11 to 15, right? So now
I'm just doing time zones in my head. So what time is it East Coast right now? Okay,
11,
I'm right.
11.
Okay. 11:50.
Yeah. I'm correct. Okay. Sorry, I'm in a more exotic time zone, so it's hard for me to look at these times in Eastern.
Indeed.
I wanted to ask, we've talked about several films and books and things like that. Could you share one book or movie about this that you own, about this subject, that is not the one you're making or have made, that you would recommend people to read, and is not my book because I've already plugged my book. So I'll take you're relieved of any burden. That was a joke, obviously.
Who would you like to answer?
You go for both of you, but either will go first. Donald, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in this terrible position as a filmmaker because no matter what I do, whether it's the public domain or we own the book, 7 or 8 people say they did it and they sue me once the movie's coming out. So I generally can't. I mean, that's why studios had walls historically. I really can't read anything. I mean, I have to stick with what I'm doing. I can't read around it because I would be accused of using pieces of it in my movie. So I'm when it's all over, I'm going to read the pile of them that keep being sent to me, but I really can't. I mean, that's the sad thing, you know.
That's fair. Michi?
Okay. I would suggest that there's a documentary called First We Bombed New Mexico.
Mhm.
What I found very powerful is that it connects the Trinity test in New Mexico with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We tend to talk about them separately, but they were all part of the series of atomic events that unfolded in 1945, right? And people are still suffering from radiation impacts. And I think it really gives us, the film gives us another way of looking at the beginning of nuclear age. So I suggest that documentary.
That's great. If I were going to suggest, documentary, my favorite on this is still Errol Morris' Fog of War. Everybody should see it if you haven't. I presume many people have seen it. And book, which is very obscure by comparison, Sven Lindqvist's A History of Bombing, which is quite interesting. And aside from being a provocative book about the development of bombing, it has a sort of choose your own adventure structure to it, which I find very compelling for some reason. All right. Thank you both. As unfortunately all the time we have, this will not be the last time we discuss this topic. The history of the atomic bombings is central to the history of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists and to their mission. There's a large archive of articles and past events on this topic on the Bulletin's website. There's also an email course that you can sign up for, which will give you weekly emails with some of their top articles from over the last 80 years on this topic. It's like an old school correspondence course, but with your email. And finally, please consider donating to support the Bulletin's mission in telling these stories. Thank you for